Oh, wow. You just got right after I unmuted.
Oh, sorry.
Anyone on Zoom just got auditorially assaulted. All right, so let's call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order. I see we have several folks on Zoom. So I will do a roll call vote to call to order. I'll start with folks on Zoom. Let me make sure I have everybody. I see John Sullivan.
Here.
Ed Ross.
Here.
Emily Sisson.
Here.
And here in the room, Andre Kume.
Here.
Mark Zero.
Here.
Marianne Downing.
Here.
And Joe Carnahan here. All right. So our agenda this evening. We have our usual, if anyone wants to make public comment, I don't think we have any public on the Zoom. I can, of course, double check that. And opportunity for liaison reports. It's June, so we have a Finance Committee Reserve Fund transfer request. As often happens at the end of the fiscal year. And then we have a couple of sort of discussion topics about communication and about policies. And then we talk about future agendas and approve minutes. All right, so let's see, switching back to the Zoom, is there anybody? Why can I not see the attendee list? There we are. All right, I don't see any, I don't see any members of the public at all on Zoom. So then let's go to liaison reports. Anybody want to go first? Have anything to report? It's been a few months since we met, so might actually have something. I can start calling on people.
Hey, Joe, I can start with just from Killam School Building Committee. We met a few weeks ago, our first one since the vote. We had a number, pretty much BAU type of meeting. We had a bunch of old invoices to catch up on, but we're kind of moving through into further into schematic design. We're starting to get all of the kind of ducks in order to be able to go and go into the next phase as far as determining like they're going to start looking at test wells. We have an upcoming meeting where we're going to be engaging with the immediate abutters just to be able to kind of talk through expectations, kind of in the next, during the first part of construction, things of that nature, as they get the site ready, tree removal, adding trees, things of that nature, things that would just impact the immediate abutters of the site. But all things, kind of moving well, a lot of wind at our backs. It also appears that going through our last, kind of timeline, we're, looking to be able to occupy, have students move over like over the February break of I'm going to blank on the year, but it'll be ready, but ready earlier than the following fall. But really kind of gets us in talking to the owner's project manager, that's kind of an ideal time to be able to move students in, and then also start the deconstruction of the existing school as well. So I'll have more definitive timelines. We're supposed to meet again next month. The abutter meeting is supposed to be also, I think we're in the confirming dates, but that also should be next month as well.
Thanks. I will just start calling on people to keep this moving along. John, you got anything?
Nothing for me.
Emily?
Yeah, sure. So talk to rec committee and Birch Meadow phase 2 moving along really smoothly. No hiccups there, no additional costs incurred so far. So that's all good. We've got, Jim and Ed have expanded programming in rec for the summer. They have a fully staffed summer camp, so all exciting there. And they just greenlit at the last rec committee, the endeavor to expand the Sturgis walkway through the woods there. I don't think there's any financial implications, but I'm not sure. But that's going really smoothly. And talked to Jenna this morning, and the only thing on the horizon there financially for them is the Parker turf. So nothing new, everything moving as expected, no unexpected money. So we're all good.
Right, here in the room. Anybody want to go first? All right, go for it.
All right, I'm just gonna, we don't usually talk about CPDC, but that's been the only board I have not watched any select board. I have a lot to catch up on. But CPDC, and I guess this was mentioned at select board, and many people know, but in case the audience doesn't know, the state did approve our MBTA community submission. So to the extent that would have any negative financial implications by not approving, or we're not in any lawsuits, we went through, so that's good. And I guess that they CPD finally approved the boardwalk proposal. They reached something mutually approved, so that'll be one more thing for our downtown. And that's all. There's probably someone else has followed select board better. A lot's been going on, but I don't.
Well, if any of
I've
us
not
has to
watched
sum
enough
up
of
several
this.
months of select board stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't set, have you set water rates yet?
Yes.
Okay, so that's something.
Yeah.
I don't know what they are. So that's all.
Well, I'm happy to chime in after all of you have a chance.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Mark?
I don't have anything other than, do you have any update, RMLT, Greg? And
Yeah, so there was, liaison report for the audit committee. We were twice invited to meetings for auditing RMLD, and both have been postponed. The first was postponed. Greg Phipps, the general manager, called me up and said that the had dismissed the finance director, and then the finance director had been in touch with the auditor, and this auditor then had additional concerns they want to investigate. And then after that, then Greg was resigning, and then learned that the meeting was being pushed back. The auditor, and this one they said it was, and I saw an email from the auditor that Greg forwarded indicating that the auditor is not ready, wouldn't be ready for, originally we would have met earlier this evening, which would have made for a busy night. So I'm okay with a little bit of putting it off, although I do hope we get to it eventually. It's now rescheduled for July 23rd.
Great.
So.
Do they have an acting director to replace him then?
I don't know.
Yeah,
You're voting on that.
Decided this.
okay.
Oh, okay. Good. Yeah, that makes sense. That's right. They had a regular meeting after what would have been the audit
The
meeting
meeting
tonight,
tonight,
so
right? Well,
makes sense they would cover that today.
Mhm.
Cool.
Joe, did you say both finance and Greg are both resigned?
Yes.
See, RMLD.
Was the finance director resignation?
It was not, it was, I want to be extremely careful discussing former employees.
Yeah.
I'm not an
yeah.
expert on the subject.
Probably want to
so
check meeting minutes.
You might want to find a more authoritative source than me trying to remember a phone call with Greg Phipps.
But Greg, but Greg definitely.
Yeah, that was in the paper.
That was a resignation. It was a press release too, yeah.
Gotcha, I hadn't seen that. Thank you.
Andrew, anything? Besides audit committee, the other, as far as CPA, the CPA study committee has continued to meet. We've now had presentations from each of the pillar areas that CPA could support, historical preservation, conservation, recreation, and, oh gosh, what am I forgetting? Oh, affordable housing, which was the first one. It was an amazing presentation too. So next steps for that committee is to start actually trying to synthesize this into a report that we can deliver to the select board. And we're looking at asking the moderator if we can give a just informational presentation at town meeting in the fall. And then the recommendation would be to have it on the warrant to vote on in the April town meeting, and then on the ballot in November 2026. So that's the timeline there. I think we have not voted on a percentage. That's a question. I know that's a hot topic. I think you know, we did a bit of a straw poll. I think we're still leaning towards 1%, although there were a couple people asking about 1.5. Winchester did adopt CPA at 1.5% in 2024, which is, I think, the first community to adopt it at greater than 1%, at least first comparable community to do it in a while. So, all right. So yes, I've watched a few select board meetings, but we have a select board liaison present. So Karen, you want to give an update on what should FinCom know about what you all have been doing?
Well, water rates is a good one. I'll let Matt handle that. And the other thing I wanted to give you a heads up is our July 15th meeting, we will be meeting to discuss the Burbank Ice Arena contract, which is supposed to be an annual lease payment. So, you know, in these belt tightening times. And on that note, if you do catch up with the select board meeting, if you haven't seen it already, we heard the discussions that you had last fall and discussions in public about your concerns. And so the select board is on board and we're all in a belt tightening mode. The ARPA funds are gone. I have been a member of the MMA Municipal Fiscal Policy Committee, so I can tell you that if it's not already signed, we're expected to get 2.2% in unrestricted government aid. You know, that could be our budget number.
Oof.
Yeah, but on the bright side, the surtax, which funds transportation and education, is wildly exceeding expectations. The challenge now is that was really written to fund one-time capital expenses, and they're starting to have conversations, well, how do we also let it support operational needs? So they have a huge pile of money to spend, and they'll be investing in culverts is one thing that caught my attention, and you need to be in compliance with the MBTA communities to be able to apply for that. So they're putting those regs in there. So that's good.
I heard that they're going to give a big chunk to the MBTA as well, or is that still a proposal?
500 million is on the table.
To me, it was a lot larger than, I thought the communities and schools should get more, but I don't know
Well,
what
so,
percent that
Is
is.
that the supplemental they just passed?
yeah.
So that's.
Well, I'm talking like $2.8 billion. So I'm not sure how far 500 million goes in the MBTA these days. It sounded like a good chunk of change that they need. So that's good, especially because the MBTA is on our radar as well about, you know, what are they going to invest in Reading? And then school per pupil numbers have been consistently at 150 per student. Last year, I think it was 104. That should help us. So, you know, those kind of things, and we'll hear more when they wrap it up. But there is money, but it's coming from the surtax, and it is just, it's exceeding last year. I think this is maybe the third year. It's just been wildly successful. And as I said, so then they know that we have operational concerns. And then the question is like, well, how can we get that in the legislation? Because we didn't really write it to fund operational.
We
But
did not vote.
we're gonna try.
Right, I was going to say, it was on the ballot. We did not vote to spend it on health insurance, even though that's what's killing us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that'll come up shortly.
Yes, it will.
But it's
Alright.
something we should know about on an ongoing basis too, because maybe nobody voted for that, but if that's a reality that everyone has.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, did you want Matt to talk about the water rates?
The water rates aren't going up, the sewer rates aren't going up. I think they're actually
Isn't that good news?
down, right? -1, and the stormwater remains the same. So, yep.
How are we managing that? Are we
I'm
draining our
that's my
reserves or
question.
something?
We're using some reserves, but not, we have very healthy reserves.
So we've been lucky with
Enterprise funds.
expensive breaks and
Right.
stuff. We've
We
had a
have,
good year.
And
That's,
so we wanted, the select board wanted to give the ratepayers a little bit of a break this year and not have a large increase with everything else going on.
So it was negative what for sewer, right?
-1, yeah. So it's actually going down, yeah.
So that's a first. It may never happen
oh,
again.
one topic I forgot. So trash contract is out to bid right now too?
Yes.
Is that I
Yeah,
think that would have been the one update I would have remembered, because
Yeah.
I think Jane mentioned that.
right.
When do we expect to hear back?
I think later this summer, do you know the exact date, Chris?
Back the end of July, and we
Oh.
hope to we'll review them in August. Have a new vendor chosen by September.
So it's coming up quick. No.
Right. Any other reports while Sharon kicks people out of her office so that she can do the FinCom reserve fund request? Nope. All right. I think next on our agenda is the Finance Committee Reserve Fund Transfer Request. I assume I should let Sharon lead off on that.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Thank you. So as you can see, I sent around a transfer request for 120,000. 31,000 of that is for a leaf sweeper. We unfortunately had a leaf sweeper catch on fire and was a total loss. And the insurance is only going to cover $12,225. But the replacement of that sweeper is $42,290.40. So the difference, and I rounded to a round number, 31,000 we need to come up with to make sure it doesn't cause any kind of delay in kind of our cleanup. And I'm sure Chris Cole can speak to how this would affect us if we didn't actually replace it right away. Snow and ice, we had requested money for snow and ice at April town meeting. However, we neglected to include an incentive that they get if they participate in overtime for each one of the snow events. And so we need an additional $18,015, but I just rounded it up to 20,000 just in case there's anything else going on there that we don't know about yet, a bill that hasn't come in. And then under police wages, we have an arbitration kind of settlement. There was a grievance related to OT assigned, and Dave Clark is there. He can actually, Chief Clark can actually speak to the details, but it did not go in our favor. It was a very positive interaction, but we do have to pay out $31,000 to the patrolman related to this this grievance, but it still was a very positive interaction, wasn't a negative one. We were doing these assignments of the details based on a ruling that we had from years ago. And apparently we were not doing it correctly. And so now we'll be using that arbitration to do it going forward. Did you have a question, Marianne?
Oh,
I thought I saw
sorry.
you.
No, realize my power's low. I'm gonna get
Okay.
closer to the charger. I'm sorry.
And then we had the other unfortunate event of an explosion in one of our manholes, and there was some damage to our fiber optics that need to be fixed. And that was not covered by insurance because it's under the $20,000 deductible. And so I rounded up to the 13,000, but the actual cost is $12,590.90. But I just rounded it up to 13 just in case. Anything that we don't use will go back to free cash. Just keep that in mind. And Chief Nelson, the new fire chief, had some concerns about his ambulance billing. That's a very difficult line for us to project because it's based on what's being billed and what kind of services the residents are in need of. And then they get a certain percentage of what they collect. And he's seeing that it's running very tight. And so he asked for a little bit more money to make sure that he doesn't end in a deficit. He had only requested 5,000. I think I changed it to 10 just because he's really tight on his expenses and he just wants to feel good about ending this first year as chief and knowing that he has enough for all the bills that are coming in. Then health insurance premiums, I asked for $15,000. We are very tight in health insurance. As I mentioned at April town meeting, there was a 20% increase or just shy of 20% increase to our MedX, which is our supplemental program for people on Medicare. That definitely wasn't included when we actually built our budget. So I'd asked for money at April town meeting and it's still very tight. So just to be safe, I asked for another 15,000 because we haven't paid out our opt-out insurance. The opt-out program is if people take their spouse's insurance instead of ours, we pay them at the end of the fiscal year. I got an estimate of 175,000 and we had just about 178 there. And I didn't know if any other bills were coming in. So I said, I'm just going to ask for another 15 just to be sure. So whatever I don't use will go back to free cash. Other than that, I don't have anything else for you except if you have further questions about the individual items, the department heads are there to provide more context.
Yeah. Jeffrey Crum emailed a set of questions to me and Matt, but I'll let other folks go first, and then I can read his questions. And actually, several folks in town staff provided written answers too. But obviously, if you're here, you can talk. So, but who has questions? Marianne?
So Sharon, given you, the extra buffer that you wanted for health insurance, do you think that that will have an impact on what we allocated in the FY '26 budget? That you think we should keep that in mind, that we may come up short if the costs are from 2025 were higher than expected?
I think the big thing that is hard to tell is that our MedX goes up in January, whereas our regular health insurance goes up July 1. And so when we're building our budget, we don't know what that increase is going to be. And so it is very possible that I will have a shortfall if MedX goes up higher than whatever percentage we put in there. I think we put in 13.5 or 13.6% for health insurance. So it's possible. The other thing that could cause us to have a shortfall is if we have higher enrollment than we had in the prior year. You know, if fewer people opt out or more people are hired that need the insurance, that can actually flux the other way towards needing a little bit more money. But right now I think we're at the right percentage, 13.6, I think is what I use for health insurance. But MedX will go up in January. And if it goes up higher than 13.6, I could need more.
So I don't recall offhand what our budget amount was, but say we needed hypothetically like another 7% at the end of FY '26 or by April town meeting. Do you have a ballpark for what that amounts to? Is it like another $100,000 or something, or?
I think we asked for 200,000 at April town meeting. That's a high number for us to ask for, but that's, you know, kind of where we're at right now because the increases are much higher than what we're used to seeing. I mean, we've been in a really great space for a really long time, and that we've had negative numbers for health insurance, single digit increases for years and years. And now we're just, for the first time in many years, getting hit with a double digit increase. And we're being told to expect a double digit increase for the next couple of years. So it is going to be a difficult line for us for the next couple of years. The positive news I have to share is today I was meeting with the retirement board and we did our pension valuation. And we had done 8.3% increases for each year for the last 2 years for the pension assessment. And I kind of shared with the board that the budget's gotten very, very tight, and until an override passes, we really shouldn't be overly aggressive with what the percentage is, that it would be better for the next couple of years for the number to be a little bit lower. And they selected a funding schedule that was, I think, 5.7%, and we were at 8.3%. So there's some relief there. For the next 2 years, we'll be at 5.7. And when I built the budget, the forecast has 8.3 for both years. So when I factor that in, that savings could help us with health insurance or some other line or reduce free cash use. So wherever we can find savings, we're definitely looking for it because it's not a comfortable place to be to need that much free cash in our budget. So that's a good
So, but
piece
just,
of-
it's on the order. It's not like we're suddenly going to be saying, oh, you know, we're 800,000, $1 million short. It might be comparable to what we've just seen.
No, I would say like 100 or 200,000. We've never really needed that much extra. But given the percentages that we're seeing, wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility, but we already flexed to absorb that 13.5% because we had started our budget with an 8.5, and then we got the actual number in January of 13.5. And so I resituated things and took down our OPEB number to pick up that additional $650,000 that we needed when we got that 13.5. So it's unfortunate that we weren't given like a heads up that, hey, this number is not even going to be 10%, it's going to be 13.5. Like we were really shocked to get that number because the heads up we got was set between 7 and 10, and that we have very good experience here in Reading, that we don't have high claims compared to what we pay in premiums, and that we would probably be on the low end of it. So imagine our surprise getting a 13.5% increase.
It's not your fault, but we appreciate your creativity and thinking ahead. Thank you. That's all for me.
Just responding to that, as you poking the final financial forecast, I see that the 13.6% in actual dollars is a $1.8 million increase. So, you know, if it were, yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, if it doubled, that's what I was trying, I couldn't remember without pulling it up, just like where it, what an extra percent would have translated to.
Yeah, so extra percent are on the order of 100,000 per percent. Kind of.
Yep, okay, so that makes sense.
So if it went up by 5% again, that would hurt.
Yeah,
That would also mean an 18% increase, which like I don't hopefully.
Well, I guess we can look to see what's happening with peer communities. I know last year Winchester saw 20% and someone else around us might have seen that high. Maybe it was Stoneham. Stoneham's a mess. It's what's going on. But
You are on television for the record.
We were told to
You are on
expect-
television for the record.
no, I mean, they have a lot of challenges. They've underfunded their OPEB. They may have to shut their library down. It was like as an update, you know, the Board of Library Trustees, they had to like discuss what do we do about patrons who, can we let them borrow if they're from a non-certified library? And I think they mentioned Stoneham and I feel bad, but they've got some challenges and they're really down to, you know, less than the bones over there. So we're in good shape.
Yeah, go ahead.
So on the leaf sweeper, it's more of a comment. So I noticed that the machine was over 10 years. And I don't have the capital plan in front of me, but do you think this was part of the capital plan or probably not?
No, it wasn't the capital plan, but I think it was not due to be replaced till like FY 29, 30, somewhere in there.
And they do have a long life expectancy, that's okay. Perfect. And my other question was for the police chief, for Dave. So quick question of the damages, it says the arbitration did award damages. What were they? Was it retro pay or was it just like a lawyer's fee?
No, please come on up. Yeah, we have some room at the table. Table actually.
Thank you. So this is a very kind of complicated, and I don't know if my memo remotely captured it because it's
That's the job. I'm happy, just out of curiosity.
so what happened is the supervisors union, patrol officers union were in disagreement with how we fill details in overtime. We've been filling it off of an arbitration case from 1992. Put that in perspective, I'm the most senior member of the department, and I was hired in 1995.
Yeah.
So when we were negotiating this last round of contracts, somebody found the arbitrator, and when we read it, the patrol union reads it one way, the supervisor union reads it a different way. Supervisor saying, hey, we've been filling details in overtime wrong since 1992. We want to split basically overtime and details, commonly for details of road work, we'll all be putting on the same list. In the contract, it's under two different sections in both contracts. The arbitrator's case talks about how money's awarded, not about being on one list. So supervisors want us to separate the overtime list from the detail list. And we were always told that the arbitrator's case said, no, that has to be on the same list. When you read the arbitrator's case, it doesn't mention combining the lists. So they wanted us to separate the lists. I met with the patrol officers union. They said, nope, we've been doing it for this way for 30 plus years. We're not doing it. We did try to bargain with them, try to meet with them. They didn't want to talk about it. At some point when they were fighting, they were not fighting, they were disagreeing. The supervisors union filed a grievance and of a violation of a specific section of the contract. When that happens, I have to, within 10 days, or actually 5 days for me, 10 days for the town manager, make a decision. So I had to side with, if I sided with the supervisors, I knew the patrol officers union was going to grieve it. So we met with Donna Brewer, the town council, Matt and I met, we discussed it. We looked at the arbitration, the writing, how the contracts were written, and we felt that the supervisors had the better argument that they've been, it's been filled wrong for the past 30 plus years. Nothing against us, no ill will in the town, just that both the unions misread the arbitrator's case from 1992. So I have to side with one union. We sided with the supervisors union. Patrol union then filed a grievance, and because we sided with the supervisors grievance, and we decided to go to arbitration to let an independent person take a look at us. This isn't adversarial. The unions are not upset with us, the town, each other. It was to have somebody decide it. The patrol officers union wasn't even asking for damages. They were just looking to have us go back to July 1, because I changed it before July 1 last year. On July 1, they wanted to go back to the way we've always done it. We met, we had a full arbitration, both attorneys and I were there, the town manager, we went through everything. We were expecting it kind of go our way, it based on court cases that are out there and past and usual. The arbitrator decided against us and then also decided to award damages to the patrol officers, saying that they were harmed financially because of the list being split. It only went back to the 1 year. They couldn't go all the way back because the patrol officers didn't have the grievance. And I know Jeff asked me a question, if the supervisors had grieved it and we had lost the supervisor, could they go back to 1992? No, they couldn't, because there's no ill will. I know, I mean, ill will sounds bad, but you know, I mean, there's no like intent in the town as a misreading. So the it's a binding arbitration. The arbitrator has awarded damages. And that's it. And like I said, nobody's upset. Yeah, and nobody's upset. There's no infighting, no nothing like that. It's just we had an arbitrator decide it, and either way, I was getting a grievance. Either way, we're going to end up on arbitration, and this is what happened. That's kind of a very long, convoluted way of trying to explain. I'm sorry. So I don't know if that confused everybody even more, or if that actually answers questions. Okay.
Is the money going to each officer or is it?
Yeah, each officer of the patrol union is going to get a portion of that.
Just like a retro pay. No, it's not. Yeah, Mayor.
Out of curiosity, how many officers are in each union?
So there's 31 patrol officers and supervisors, so there's 12. So there's the deputy chief, and I don't count, we're not in the union. So there's 4 lieutenants and 8 sergeants. So it's 12 versus 31.
Yeah.
But supervisor pay is higher, so it would have been either way, probably.
Yeah.
The damages part did shock us, even town council was a little shocked because nobody was asking for that.
Yeah.
And you cannot fight that.
It's not more money. Yeah, we wouldn't see it.
Arbitration, it's not like a.
Yeah.
It's binding.
It's binding.
Arbitration, town council advised us to abide by it.
So, okay.
All right. Other
Thank you. That was helpful.
I will go through, let's see, I guess you responded to Jeffrey's question.
Yeah.
In an email and you repeated it here. I'm just going through Jeffrey's other questions. Yeah, yes. Jeffrey asked about the acronym for what's the Massachusetts something Insurance Association. There was, Chris, I'm trying to see if you answered this already. What was the cause of the fire? Do we know the cause of the fire?
Cause of the fire was dry leaves blowing up against the exhaust on the sweeper and igniter.
Okay. Seems I have questions about the design, considering the dry leaves are sort of.
There was no injury of any of the,
That's.
who was using it, that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Last fall was excessively dry.
Mhm.
It was unusually dry.
No, I remember we had the fire ban and all that stuff, yeah.
We also, that's when all the forest fires were going on.
Yeah, right, and it was brick. Yeah. All right, let's see, I think that was Jeffrey's first question, and then on, there was a question about the, arbitration that, Chief Ruck addressed, regarding the fiber optic repairs. He just asked for more information about these, I think, wait, what explosion, which is a fair response to any reference to explosion. To me, there was an explosion on Salem Street. Yes, I guess there was. I don't know, I'm about to say, do you want to talk, or I could read your message, but.
Well, you being a master electrician, you probably. Yeah, the Cliff Note version is the power comes to the Main Street Fire Station underground at the rear driveway from Salem Street. There was that it's a primary line, so it's a very high voltage, needs a transformer. One of the lines failed, and when it failed, there was a massive arc. That's the explosion. It damaged, we lost power on the station. What happens is the fiber lines use that same pathway running out. They're a different conduit, but they go through the same vault underground. Well, the arc is so big, it vaporized some of the fiber optic lines and damaged others. And it carries our radio system, our inter-building communication, data, our phone, it carries all of that. And luckily, Kevin had a redundant system in, because it blew up one side of the system and heavily damaged the other side, but it was just, like, literally glass fibers were there, but they were just enough that they worked and kind of kept us together. So that's what the explosion was. It was Saturday morning. Surprise.
And I think he also asked about ambulance billing. Let me just read his question because it's a bit long. I thought that the town received significant income from ambulance operations due to our advanced life support ambulances getting good reimbursement from insurance companies. I don't recall how this appears in the budget. We have separate lines for ambulance income and ambulance billing rather than net income. If we have additional billing costs, I would expect this to be because the fire department provided additional services. So we should be seeing additional income from the services, and the billing costs should surely be less than the revenue from providing services. Do we see additional income somewhere? And then for some reason, the extra billing costs can't be subtracted from that income. Does the income close to free cash?
I can answer that.
Yes.
So the revenue goes to a revenue account and the billing expense goes to an expense account that's appropriated. So I can't spend more than what I've appropriated for that line item, even though I probably am receiving more in revenue for ambulance billing than I would have, projected. So there would be some return to free cash in the area of the revenue for ambulance billing. But the expense side, which is what we pay that third party to do the billing for us, that is an expense. And that's what's trending high, is because we're having varied services month to month, what's being billed, and they get a percentage. It's really hard to know what that number is going to be every year. And so this year it just seems to be a little bit on the tight side. And I don't blame Chief Nelson for being a little concerned. I mean, overall, though, if expenses were still in line for public safety, we would be fine, but I wouldn't want him to be stressed about it. So I felt like it made sense to ask for this little amount of money just to give him some comfort to make sure that everything would be okay and that his department wouldn't look like it had a deficit at the end of the year.
Is it typical that if some other community is also, sorry, I meant to raise my hand on a question, but getting revenue from ambulances, that it goes into free cash versus like, a self-funding situation where it goes into a fund dedicated for its own operation, or some significant percentage of it?
So all revenue is general fund revenue unless otherwise stated by town meeting by a vote. And so it naturally will flow to the general fund, to the operating budget, unless you had a town meeting vote asking you to put together a revolving fund. So you might find other communities might have a revolving fund for ambulance and ambulance billing, but in this case, we do not. We've never gone to town meeting and asked for such a revolving fund. So it ends up being general fund revenue.
And I guess it's all a wash if you appropriate enough for what's needed.
It is, yeah.
Money.
Whatever you're appropriating, I'm sure we're getting more in the revenue side. I mean, right now, the general fund revenues are looking very healthy and above what we projected. So there will be regeneration I've already seen regeneration on the general fund side, and we're, not quite done yet with, we usually get a lot of our state aid for June, the last day of June. So I expect us to have some very healthy numbers for regeneration for the general fund.
Thank you.
Any other questions about any part of this request? And that bit, Marianne, I'll just make, following up on your comment about being a wash, like I think it's the way we do things here, we seem to like to, our custom is to, budget conservatively and regenerate a lot. And we're doing that here. There's several instances of where we might need it. I guess that doesn't change how much money is being spent.
No, I know. I guess I think like, if ambulance funds were generating money and then they need it, but then some other use is taking it, that's, we have free cash, let's start this new initiative, not free cash, but we have regeneration, let's start some new initiative, and ambulance is like, wait, we need them. I feel like when you ought to get priority if you're helping to contribute to the overall revenue, but it doesn't always work that way.
Plus, the other thing is you have more flexibility the way we have it now, because if you do a fund, you need 2/3 vote, and if it's written in such a way, you will need permission. And for what? For ambulance. I don't think you cannot pay the bills. You know what I mean? So that's why most communities they do it. They approach it by.
So they can't, because it's revolving, they'd still need a vote to spend out of its dedicated revolving.
I have to look at, I don't even think you can do it, I have to look at the law if it says that, but it gets complicated if you do, because like any other
Meeting
like-
votes every year on limits for revolving funds, so you're then limited by that vote.
most
Other
of
town
the
meeting votes.
revolving accounts, that's how they are.
Yeah, maybe I'm
Right.
thinking like with the school ones, because the school ones, they can just spend, but the town.
For the
ones,
school, the town is,
The town ones have No, and they can spend right on the use, like the kindergarten and extended day, but the schools, I mean.
It depends on what section. It depends on what section of the law the revolving fund falls under, whether or not you can spend it directly. So the schools are usually done by legislation, and so they have, more freedoms to spend it without bringing it back to town meeting. Most of the ones that we do on the town side have to go to town meeting, have spending limits and all of that. And the good thing about having ambulance coming into the general fund is that it can close into our free cash and help fuel, because we probably more than likely most years do regenerate free cash through ambulance. So I feel like it is a good regeneration line for us as well into the general fund. And it seems like our revenues cover expenses. The problem is in this case, the expenses are higher, but our revenues will be higher, but I can't take the revenues to pay for the expenses. I've got to have an appropriation. So, but I do think that it makes our general fund much healthier to have the ambulance within there, because there is regeneration to be found there.
No, that's fine. I mean, I think as long as we track it too, if someone at town meeting has a later question about the budget line item, you can say, well, this is what we generated. It went to free cash, so this amount of appropriation makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Town meeting, it's funny, we usually have a replenish FinCom reserves item on every November town meeting. I don't remember town meeting ever actually asked us what we had done with the money, which they probably should be.
After other line items and ask about
We should be
things.
offering information about that, because they're just like, oh yeah, reserves, you need another $150,000 for reserves. Well, where did they go? Well, we did talk about it. Yeah. But
I usually present what it's for. When we ask for your money back, I'll say what you used it for. Usually, maybe, and if they have questions, they'll have follow-up questions. But I give them a summary of what we used it for.
Like the new fire truck was 80,000 more or something. People
But
understand.
Sharon, so the 80 we're not gonna allocate, that does go to free cash though, right?
Yes, that's going to go to free cash for sure. And I'm expecting that the numbers that I've kind of rounded up, most of that money will go back. I mean, I even think that the health insurance premium one that I've asked for is a buffer. There's a good chance we won't use all of that as well. So for whatever extra that is remaining in any of these accounts, it will all go back to free cash. It's just to make sure that we don't have any deficits or any unknowns coming at us. I do feel like benefits just all over the place in terms of things being up. I mean, unemployment, those bills are so variable that, the last few years, like they're just things you just don't know what might be coming for a bill that hasn't been paid yet. So that's why I asked for that, but there's a chance we won't need any of it. So, and it would just go back to free cash.
any other questions? Checking Zoom again. No hands there. All right. I believe we need a motion to, what might it be exactly, to approve the Finance Committee Reserve Fund transfer request that's presented.
So moved.
So moved. You beat me.
Sorry, Emily, you got the Zoom lag.
Emily.
So thank you, Marianne, for the motion. Thank you, Mark, for the second. Roll call vote. Emily,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Ed.
Should follow high standards.
Ed, you got to unmute and then say yes.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, Andrew,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Marianne,
Yes.
and Joe Carnahan, yes. All right. I don't sign that. Cool. So let me leave without doing that. All right. That was a vote of, we have 6 votes, right? Yes. Thank you. All right. You're lucky like me. Yeah. Right. Oh, all right.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. All right. Sounds good. All right. So, moving along, so there were a couple of sort of discussion topics, we have that, so much of our schedule during the year is tied to the budget process, and we are having long meetings just to get through, what we absolutely have to get through. There are a couple topics that had come up over the course of the year that I wanted to revisit now that we are not in the middle of budget season. One was the topic of communications with the select board, and then actually outside of the meeting, Mary Ann brought up to me that the school committee is also, they actually allocate an even larger chunk of the budget than town operations. So, which is a very good point. And then the other had to do with policy. So I wrote a memo, put it in the packet for background. I also emailed Ed and Mary Ann as the current select board liaisons from finance committee, and Carlo and Karen Herrick as the select board liaisons to us. Just summarizing the feedback, there was, trying to be more proactive about contacting the other boards liaisons to make sure they know about, agenda items that are going to be of interest. Actually would love some input from the select board about what is interesting to you all, which things are. I mean, if you tell us to tell you about everything we do that involves money, well.
Your major item tonight, I think the select board needs to know. When I was on the finance committee, we might have, usually it was a boiler that would go and be like a $50,000 item, and it would be occasionally. So I was I haven't been to this particular meeting in a while, I guess. I emailed you before the meeting, so I was kind of surprised at the size of it.
You mean you wanted to know about the transfer, the amount, out of our reserves?
The fact that we're having year-end transfers, I think the select board should be aware of that. And then, yeah, the size, that would be great, an update for the select board, so.
I mean, I feel like every year I've been on FinCom in June, there's always some transfer to cover something.
Well, that's what you said too, but
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been the same thing every year, but yeah, it's not always.
It was the $80,000 fire truck, and there was some other short.
But there's been years where there's been enough too, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like maybe just recent years, since the pandemic, there's always been.
You know what else, Joe? I don't know part of this, but like, it seems like there are times that all three groups aren't in the loop on things. And it's sort of like, the budget's passed, and then we sort of don't know what happened. Like the ladder truck, it got sold. How much did it get sold for? I doubt anybody on the FinCom knows that.
Has it been sold?
I don't know, it's like, go chase.
She doesn't know anything. She's like.
But it was like,
What ladder truck got sold? You mean the purchase of a ladder truck, or
No,
we
the
sold
one
one?
we sold, didn't we sell one?
Don't usually.
The old one.
Yeah, it did, I think the chief was left, but I think they sold it to another community.
It was like Malden or Everett.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
my point is not the fire truck,
Right.
it's just, there's a lot that happens, like, the new floor in the field house, got 3 million, but I heard the bid came in at 2.6 million. So it's like, we don't get, any group, I don't think it's.
Well taken, like, we want to stay on top of, like, in this
But
kind of
there's
budgeting
also,
situation,
Sharon-
any underruns.
Sharon groups to go out to get a debt offering. So like the gym, you might not have done at the 3 million, so there's nothing available there. But there are times like the Parker roof there was debt a lot more than what was spent. So that money had to be spent within like 2 years on other capital projects. So there's some of this historical that I feel like FinCom doesn't know, probably the select board doesn't know. School committee really isn't involved with that, but there's a lot of it, I look at like all the capital that's been approved, like even, phase 2, that was 2 million, like over 2.5 years ago that got approved. And it's like, well, where are we on that? And, us as FinCom members, we should know all of that, like every piece of capital that was approved at.
You mean like maybe a quarterly check, like the way the school committee has, how the school committee finance director does that quarterly financial update? Here's how we are running with the budget. And they sometimes they do cost center transfers. You don't have to do cost center transfers because it's the town side and it's state law, but maybe this is like creating more work for you, or maybe you're already doing it and then we just need to see it. Are you saying?
So
like
I
a
do
quarterly
quarterly.
financial update?
I'm sure Sharon knows all of this.
Right, maybe it's an analogous thing to that quarterly update, so we see where we are, at least versus the budget.
Yeah.
I think that we do I do a quarterly financial update with the select board. I don't know, we've had one this quarter, but usually I give them a quarterly update and they learn about the revenues, expenses, and where we're at. And sometimes
Okay.
they'll even request a special for me to go through the capital,
We did
more
recently.
detail. Yeah.
It seems like.
But
FinCom
I
ought to
do
hear
think that
too.
in the past, the go-between has been the town manager, like when we're having FinCom reserve fund transfers, it's been the town manager kind of letting the select board know, hey, just an FYI. They CC them on the emails that we send
That's
out
what
to
I
you.
thought, and I didn't remember
There was
the
always some
timing.
sort of, communication that, so that at least the chair and the vice chair know that we're requesting a FinCom transfer. The other thing that would, I wanted to address, because it is true that we never needed this much money generally at the end of the year. The last few years, because the budget's been so tight, we have not been increasing our expenses in the departments at all. Pretty much, you'll notice that when we present our budgets, most of the time we're telling you that our expenses are flat, which means we've got very little buffer in there for the unexpected. And so you're going to need more free cash or FinCom reserves when you're
Reserve
going
spending,
that
yeah.
lean. We're very lean when we're building our department budgets because the accommodated cost has left us so little of a buffer, because all of them have been going up and none of them really have stabilized for us in a real way to relieve that pressure that we've been feeling the last couple of years for the accommodated costs. So the departmental budgets, those expenses that we keep in there for, equipment and supplies, and we've kept most of that stuff flat unless there was some contract that made it go up, like facilities, when they have a cleaning contract, it goes up. But if we could keep it flat, we kept it flat. And so more years you do that, the more likely you are to be very thin in areas and something unexpected comes up and now you need to ask. So it is true that we didn't ask for as much in the past. It's just kind of reflective of where we are with our budget right now, needing an override and being so tight with what we have to budget for. So that is true that we are asking for more than what we typically would at year end. But that's why I think it's because we really have been very, very tight with what we budget the departments for their expenses.
So for capital, can we get quarterly updates where we are on projects?
Absolutely. If that's the way you want to do it, like on a quarterly basis, we could tell you where we are. I mean, the Birch Meadow Phase 2 has not been borrowed for, has not moved forward. The last time I checked with Ryan Percival, he keeps me apprised of where they are. He was worried that we wouldn't have enough money. And that's why I ended up doing a ban for the Fieldhouse floor, because I was going to borrow for those two projects together. He felt that Fidel may have underestimated the cost of that project, so he didn't want to borrow until he knew he had enough money, which is why I ended up doing a short-term borrowing in May for the Fieldhouse floor. And we are going to go out and permanently borrow in January for the projects. We're going to request internal borrowing to get us through January so that the excluded debt doesn't appear on the fiscal 26 bills. We have enough reserves that we can do that. And that was advice of our bond counsel saying, hey, this is how I would do it. The bond advisor said, this is how I would borrow this money. You only have one thing to borrow for May. Let's do, a short-term borrowing, get us to January, and we'll borrow permanently for, Killam, whatever we need for our cash flow for Killam, for a recal, for pickleball, whatever you need to borrow, let's borrow all those things in January, and Birch Meadow Phase 2 is supposed to be on that list. So we haven't started anything yet for Birch Meadow Phase 2, but it is on the list of things that we plan to borrow in January. But I don't think it's waiting till January. We'll do internal borrowing. And what that means is because we have such strong reserves, we can borrow against our reserves. We just have to notify DOR of what we've borrowed.
It costs $100,000 for her to do a short-term borrowing for 6 months.
That was
that's like-
the interest on, it was just the interest on a 3 million, that was interest mostly. But yeah, it's a lot of money. But if I were to do a borrowing for one project, it's so expensive to borrow that it really makes sense with the debt issuance cost to actually, pair them up as much as you can. And where we have so much to borrow, timing it all into January makes the most sense so that we have time to figure out how much we need for each project and permanently borrow for as much as we can and keep that debt issuance cost down, because it's really expensive to borrow permanently. And obviously even short term, it's expensive to borrow as well, but not as.
See, Andrea, I want to ask you a clarification on that. So it's what I'm hearing is that it's not free to borrow against internal reserves, but it's cheaper than a external borrowing of that size for that term would have been?
Okay, so two things. A ban is, first thing is that we did a short-term borrowing in May for the Fieldhouse floor for the $3 million that they requested. And it was a 9-month ban. And we can start to pay that off 3 months early. So we are going to borrow permanently in January for that project when we borrow for Killam and the recal and whatever other projects we have on the agenda. When I say internal borrowing, that is free to us. It's our money.
Oh, okay.
We're borrowing from ourselves. So we're not paying any interest or anything. It's just we're naming our timeline when we can line up all those projects into a spot where the cash flow is going to work for all the projects, you know, and we'll have all the final numbers that we need for Birch Meadow Phase 2. What's the cash flow look like for pickleball? Do they need money in January? We'll be able to get them all borrowed at the same time, and that minimizes issuance costs. If you do them all, we have so many things right now on the agenda with Killam, recal, pickleball, Birch Meadow Phase 2. We've got a lot out there right now. It makes sense to try and line them up to one borrowing and incur that cost
That makes
once,
sense,
not
yeah.
5,
No, that-
6 times.
Get that.
Would you put the, how the pumper truck, that new pumper truck got approved for the fire department? Is
Mhm.
that, like, would that be next January? Is that like a year or two till it even gets delivered?
So the pumper truck is part of our capital plan and is not borrowed for, but that's something we might entertain as we've gotten higher in cost for our fire engines. We may need to start thinking about borrowing for a couple of years for them as opposed, because it really cripples the capital plan when you have something that's gone up to $1.4 million. When it was 500, 600, 700,000, it was a lot, but this 1.4 that's sitting out there for most of these trucks, it's a lot. So that's another thing that we need to discuss is, does it make sense to borrow for them for 2-3 years just to spread that cost out a little bit so that the capital plan isn't so crippled on the years that we have to buy a fire truck? And it takes about 2 years now. The supply chain has just been damaged from the pandemic. I don't think they've fully caught up, and it used to take us a year. Now it takes us like 2 years to get a fire truck in, and that's just insane. You just hope that the truck that it's replacing can hold on for this. So I mean, that is part of the capital plan. The thing that we do in Reading that's unique is the fact that we don't borrow for things like fire trucks, but they're getting to a price point we may not be able to include them in the capital plan the way we have and pay cash for them. We may need to think about borrowing them and make it a short term, a 2 or 3 year borrowing, something really, that they're off our books quickly, but still help move things around the capital plan a little easier.
I want to follow up on my own question, but also want to say hi, Joe. We've got another. Have you been here a little while, or did you just join? Zoom makes that hard to tell.
I'm traveling and I had trouble getting in, so
Oh,
it's more on my side, not yours. So sorry.
okay. No, I just I assume Jackie can probably tell for the minutes when you showed up because she's on the Zoom. So cool.
So if you want me to do quarterly updates on the capital, I'm absolutely willing to do that. Whatever is requested, I will do.
So what was the thing that then? So if the Fieldhouse floor was the 9-month ban, what was the internal borrowing for?
So internal borrowing is, so if you think about it, Recal is going to need money before January, and so will Killam. When I look at their cash flow, I know they're going to need money, but we can borrow it from ourselves and not pay anything to get us for whatever we need to get us through January. We can borrow from ourselves, pay no interest whatsoever because we're borrowing from ourselves, and then we issue in January. And then by doing that, nobody in Reading is going to see a debt exclusion amount on their fiscal 26 bills. Everything will hit fiscal 27 and after. So it gives them a little reprieve. It doesn't show up all of a sudden as this huge number. And as we said, I'm not going to borrow all at once. We're going to probably borrow in tranches. So, one might hit 27, the next might be in 28. So it's going to come on more gradual.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what the interest rates are too. I mean, if it's advantageous to borrow more, that could change. But I feel like not knowing what's to come, I think that we will continue with the thought process of borrowing in tranches because we have to spend it we have like 18 months to spend. And so you have to adhere to the timelines that they set out. Because if we earn more than what we pay out in an interest rate that they have arbitrage, we have to pay back. So we have to be really careful about how much we borrow to make sure that we can borrow it in the timeline that is allotted for us.
Henry, you've been patiently waiting to ask your question.
Yeah, so a few things actually as we're discussing, I'm making a mental map. So on the updates that we're asking Shannon, and just open for discussion. For us as FinCom, once we go through the budget, we go through the capital plan, we know most of the items that are there. So I think that our job is, once we decide what's gonna go in there, we all agree to it. The follow through of what happens with that item, the money is being encompassed for you. You have already accounted for the money. If, let's say, you say 2 million, and then let's say 1.4 only, and gets expense, and there's also 600K left there, I feel that that's always in the budget. So when we go through the budget, we kind of, Shannon does a pretty good job of outlining what's out there and what's left. This is my personal opinion, feel it's a little bit excessive. Maybe if we can do a request, we all agree on and say, okay, maybe we need an update from Sharon, and then she goes in and she does that. But I don't see what we will get out of it, because let's say she tells you you have 400K left. What's that gonna do? How's that gonna help you in any kind, shape or form? Because that money has already been approved from town meeting. I don't think you can do anything with it.
No, but it's good for us to know that we're
Yeah,
not
so,
spending it.
what I'm having
And
a hard
if
time
it
is-
was debt issued, like we sort of were surprised and didn't understand the Parker rule.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it was like,
Yep.
all right, there's
It was like the
900,000
same thing.
available.
And we're like
And
running
we're all
around
sitting
trying
there
to
going like,
stuff it. I
why
mean,
don't
it was
we-
ridiculous.
Why don't we know this? You know, and it's the same thing, like, you know, selling the old ladder truck, you know, that was coming in through revenue, I think, Sharon. But like, if I got asked, if somebody called me and said, Mark, you're on the FinCom, what happened with the fire truck? I don't know. You know, it's sort of like there's things we should know. And it's not just the current budget. It's like, you know, the phase 2 was passed 2 fiscal years ago.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been spent. Like if somebody called me and said, what's going on with phase 2? I don't
I
know.
get those
I haven't gotten that.
questions all the time.
So we
That's perfect, that's fair, that's what the type of discussion that I'm trying to get
Yeah.
out of here.
But it's not just,
But the
not
other-
just the current budget is what I'm talking about. There's
Yeah.
like, there's sort of things that are happening
I've been
that,
pestering him about the tennis courts at Barrows. Because we,
Oh.
town meeting approved those quite a while ago. And it may be the same situation, but yeah.
but it's
there's other
we
examples.
just, you know, it's not just the current budget. And
Yeah.
Sharon, I know Sharon's got it all. It's just like, you know,
Yeah.
something like that, the roof, we all got caught. It was like 900, it's like, whoa, what's going on? And like, you know, I've been on there, you know, Ed's longer than me and we came on the same time and like, there's still things that like, we
Yeah,
should
and I
know.
think things sometimes get brought up, like Jane or Matt will tell select board maybe in reports.
Right.
The bids came in for something and it kind of goes really quickly and you guys usually have other issues. And just as I don't know, semi-related aside, and I don't know, as we're building up to telling the community about the need for an override, and a lot of that's gonna be operating expenses, but just this annual quarterly visibility, or maybe not quarterly, like spring,
That's what I'm trying to
spring,
figure
summer,
out. Yeah,
maybe
that's-
a few, you know, once in the fall, once in the spring, once, you know, I don't know about summer. But something a little more regularly than budget time will give more visibility to the public about, hey, you know, we've got all these projects, we want to do more, we have an operating budget, all of these things, all of these things that come in ahead, you know. It also a running tally of the free cash or the reserves, whatever you want, what we have and where it's going. I think the public needs to know the free cash too.
Yes, so here's what I think then, because what I'm hearing is there is a triggering event that's causing Mark to ask this type of question, and that triggering event is either a talk of for override or something else, but there's always a triggering event or a neighbor that's just asking him. So I think a better approach here is an ad hoc request to the town accountant to do this. So when someone asks Mark or you, or that triggering event
I guess,
happens.
I guess if she's
usually
already
a
doing
request,
something that
she
we
has
can
that
leverage.
already.
But if Sharon's already preparing some version of something and we're not creating extra work and it's just saying again, here's the stuff I'm already tracking.
Yeah, I mean.
Like your spreadsheet that you have that is always, projecting the free cash over the years. You've been maintaining that, not that I'm saying, Sharon, bring it up now, but you could because you have it, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's just something you already have.
Do you track all that, Sharon, now on this? Do you have one spreadsheet where you're tracking, what got approved,
Yes.
what the bids came
Required
in
by
at?
DOR.
What's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you
That
mean for
is a
the
requirement.
capital? What the
Yeah.
bids come at? Like, I'm
That's
not always
borrowing.
involved in the bid process, like in terms of what the bids come in. I definitely am involved, like at the level of if there's borrowing, they're not allowed to do anything until I've borrowed. They're not,
Yeah.
because I can't have a deficit. But I'm never at the table when they do a bid opening, so I couldn't necessarily tell you when the bids
We
are
do
open.
track it.
Usually
Sharon, like the field house, did you not know that came in under?
I did, but they had me borrow the 3 million because I think there's something more they're going to do
So
that's
they want it to
related
be
to
another Parker roof to be a.
Well,
Yes, that's not good.
That is.
No,
I
no,
was gonna say, that is-
there was
She
something
wasn't
related
psychic.
to
She had
that.
to borrow. She didn't know the bids were.
No, not the borrowing.
Approved it, so I'm like, how do we figure this
But if
out?
something
No,
got
no.
approved,
I
if
heard
the
that it
scope
was
of
a
work got
lower.
approved at 3 million, and then the bids came in at 2.6,
Why are we been
then
three?
I would look at that 400,000 needs to be approved if they want to change the scope. That's,
Right.
So
Before you vote.
I don't-
so
I
what
don't-
town meeting
Say that it
authorizes,
comes in over
that's
budget.
what town meeting authorizes
Well, they
does
always
not
say-
mean that's how much you are spending now. If the bid come under, you still have that buffer.
no, you got
But you
that
can still
approved,
spend
but it
it.
was also a scope of work that was approved. I think town
That's
meeting,
correct.
if they found
Yes.
out that they approved a scope, it came in under, and then they're gonna change it and not go back to town meeting, I don't know.
Not really
I don't
good.
think that they don't usually do that though. They don't say, oh, we have this,
I don't think.
let's
yeah.
do more
Well,
because.
now we're
we
stuck
borrowed
with
for
this.
it.
Okay, so
No,
we're all
that's-
talking over each other and I need Sharon to tell us what actually happened here. So there's some sequence of events that involves like, I know the first step because we were there. Town meeting approved $3 million for the field house floor with a presentation of the scope of work.
And
At some point, there's some bidding and at some point, there's some borrowing. Oh, how did that play out?
So I had heard from the facilities manager, Joe Huggins, that it was coming in at like 2.6. So when it was time to borrow for it, I knew he needed that money in May. I reached out and I asked him, am I borrowing 2.6, 2.7? What am I borrowing? And he said, borrow the 3 because they need the contingency money. They always have contingency built into all their projects. And so he's like, I'd rather have the excess and move it to another project than not have borrowed enough.
That's
My
the problem.
But,
That's what's concerning
but that money,
residents.
here's the other thing, that money does not go anywhere. It's accounted for that project, you cannot use it for anything else, and it earns little interest. So that,
No,
it's,
that's not true,
it's there.
Andre. That's
Oh,
not
it's
untrue
true.
because
No,
we
it
were
does earn
spending down.
interest.
Yes, it does.
No,
that's
no,
what
not
little
that part.
interest.
The part where it doesn't go anywhere. No, it gets reallocated to other projects.
Similar,
Which helps you
Similar
though,
pro-
usually
Yeah.
similar projects, yeah.
similar project with the same lifespan,
Yep,
but
that.
Yeah, but
that
it
the
is,
residents have no
I
input, the
understand.
Town meeting didn't
I
authorize.
understand why not everyone's comfortable with that because it does feel a bit like it's being allocated to something which is similar, but it's also not what we actually voted on. So.
In the
but
past,
it's-
right, the excess has gone where it's gone to projects that we've approved, but then they ran over, right? So rather than going down,
Because
we had it
this is why I'm having a hard time. If it gets allocated to another project, that means that the dollar value on that other project goes down because you already have
Exactly.
the money.
Another approved project, not new.
Or sometimes projects
yes,
get made
that's
up
fine.
because they know there's $400,000 of extra money
So-
floating around.
yeah, I mean,
That's my
it's-
concern.
It's a little.
No, that's
It might
not-
be a little bit, it might be a little bit.
Just so you know,
similar to-
I
to
don't
like-
allow that, so that
Well,
does
well,
not happen.
They come to
So-
you in the form of
Okay.
requests because they all know there's extra money coming on. That
I-
this
I do-
happens.
So
So there's
understand
some-
something? I know the Parker roof thing was a surprise. And what happened with the Parker roof is when they put it out to bid, they did not have enough money. And then they went back to town meeting, they got the money that they needed to cover what the bid was. Then they put it back out to bid and it came in lower, but they'd already borrowed for it because they thought they knew how much the project had cost. But I'll tell you, that served us very well because I borrowed that money at 0.87%. And we were able to spread that around. Interest
So
rates, by
I-
the time I was spreading that
Yes.
round, we're up to in the 3% range for us. And we borrowed it at 0.87. So it's never, it doesn't, having the contingency funds in the borrowing is not necessarily a bad thing because it does help us make sure we have plenty for the project. And if there is excess, I move it to another project, and that's how it works. It doesn't mean that we're going to overspend on the project. It just means that they know that they have, if something unexpected comes up in a project, especially building projects particularly, they have contingency built into these amounts. So I expected to borrow less for the field house floor because I had heard through the grapevine that it had gone, you know, a bid came in lower. But he's like, I'd really rather just borrow the 3 just to be sure. And so that's what I did. I did the 3. And if he doesn't use it, I move it. You know, if they don't need it and they have to use it for what the project is, it's not, you know, oh, I feel like doing this, I'm going to do this. It has to be under what was described to town meeting.
The other thing here, I mean, we've now reached the frontier between finance and psychology, I think. Where because I mean, speaking as a, and I mean, this started, I mean, when did the Parker roof, we started spending things on Parker roof about 2 years ago. Yeah, so I was pretty
That was got hung up in COVID.
Yeah, that was before my time,
So-
but
like-
yeah.
so so as a newer finance committee member at the time, I was just like, ooh, free money. But like so it's not that it wasn't actually free money. Town meeting had to vote when we're like, oh, we're going to take this money from the Parker roof and we're doing it for this. And yes, town meeting did vote on. I mean, we voted on it and recommended it, and then town meeting voted on it and approved it. So technically, there's no overspending here because technically the money that wasn't spent on one project, town meeting voted to spend it on something else. That sounds all good.
Yes,
There is a difference in practice because I think the psychological barrier to spending the money when, oh, we've already borrowed it is not the same. I think that's the issue here, that in practice, we're going to end up spending more money if we overborrow, if we make a habit of it. It sounds like, I mean, so Parker roof, totally weird situation. It's obviously,
It was
no
a
one would have
one-off of
predicted.
a
Yeah, no one
situation.
would have predicted that. We borrowed, we actually, we put it out to bid and then borrowed and then put out to bid again, which is not the normal order. I mean, like, yeah. And the part where I put it out to bid twice is weird, of course. The fieldhouse floor, I'm a little less comfortable about. I do hope that we're not making a habit. That's sort of like, we have contingency and now we have contingency on contingency. And then the contingency on contingency just becomes money that is a little easier to spend later. Because as much as I like the things that we tend to spend money on, I am worried that if it's too easy to spend money, we are going to spend it faster than we otherwise would.
But does it end up going to other things that we approved that ran over? I mean, do we?
Or that we wouldn't have done at all. I think we did, I mean, we spent the Parker roof on like 4 different things or something. I lost track of all the things we spent Parker
But were
roof.
they, I don't remember, were they new?
Some
or
were
were they
new. I think some were new, some were,
Subsequent projects.
like, I think a fire truck going over was, I think, there was a fire truck that came in at twice the price, and we spent some Parker roof money on that.
The Birch Meadow
But
phase.
then I think,
Sprinkler system project.
I think some of it went to the field house too, didn't it? The first time it got approved at town meeting.
No, there was Birch Meadow phase 1. I know the first phase 1, the one that had the snack shack thing. That one,
Yeah.
and so,
that bid came in much higher than we expected, right?
Yeah, and that happens a lot where you get an authorization and then you do the bids and they come in a little higher. So they always have their numbers, have some contingency built into them. I mean, I was surprised that he asked for the 3 to be borrowed because I thought I would be borrowing a smaller number. But in the end, I would take the remainder and apply it to the next project and borrow less for the next project. So I don't look at it as necessarily a bad thing as long as they're doing what they're supposed to.
I think that's a fine approach because there'll always be more capital coming. But it'd be nice to know where are those pockets, because even doing down at the depot that just passed, that was 4 million, 2.6 from the state, but then the 1.4 there were different pockets where those funds came from.
That was, I would say, that was new spending that not all of us supported, in fact.
Oh, right. Well, that
But
had
those-
varying scope. The whole, you mean the Lower Haven Street?
Yeah, but even
changed.
that, we don't know, we don't have visibility to those pockets. of
Yeah,
where, you
because
know,
who knows what's gonna happen with, well, recount like pickleball. I feel like that's something that's ripe to go in many different directions with those courts. We're gonna find things we don't know about when we start digging there and clearing.
Well, Sharon, you and I have talked about as well, you have to make sure that they get spent on similar projects of similar
Well, it's
length
required
was
by
one of
law,
the
yeah.
criteria, right?
Yeah, it's the borrowing terms.
Determines what's similar.
I think,
It's all
There-
written
she's
in
got
the law.
rules just to follow.
It's written in the law about the borrowing terms that are allowed for different types of projects. So it has to be either the same borrowing terms or greater that it can be moved to. So a
So
building
it
project
could
such
be
as
moved to,
Killam or Recal would qualify for any money I have laying around, which now that is approved, anything we do have laying around, like money left over from the library, we couldn't use that for anything else because it's a building project. It's a 30-year borrowing eligibility. So I couldn't just move that to a small thing. I need to move it to a building project. And so now that those projects are, approved, those excess funds that are laying around for things like the library will get moved to those
So
projects.
we've been
And
paying
they were
interest
borrowed
for
at very
arbitrage on the library for like 10 years.
So
What
we
needs-
spent the
what needs to be
majority.
done on
It's
the
it's a
library?
do we
small
have
amount.
funds
No, there was-
available?
There was money
Do
left
we have funds
over.
available from the library?
That's what
I
I'm
think
saying.
it's like
We've been paying-
$90,000 or something.
We've been paying
Overall,
somebody interest on $90,000 for 10
No,
years.
but that's sort of my point.
The
That's-
interest we
don't-
paid
not
on
the
that was
interest,
very
But those
small.
pockets, we don't know, like,
Yeah.
and that,
is there money for, would still
like that
from wood
90
and
could go
school?
buy the leaf blower and.
But you have
some-
to
Well, it can,
understand,
but it can go to Recal or Killam because it's a building.
Yeah, the time, the length.
That's why we've been waiting.
Is
'cause-
pickleball building?
No.
Even though it's not a building, it's.
to spend a
making
building
courts?
project down to zero is very difficult. You
Oh,
always
yeah.
have to have contingency in there. So the fact that there might be 90-something thousand left from the library, that doesn't concern me because I knew that we had projects coming up that we could move it to. We borrowed it at a very low interest rate. I can't remember
Yeah.
what, but it was maybe 1.49%. Like I can't borrow for that right now at
Well, I
all.
mean, well,
And
the
so
thing about-
I will reduce the borrowing on another project by whatever money we have laying around. It can't be viewed as necessarily a bad thing. Think about how hard it is to spend a project down to zero. It's not easy. There's always, you always gonna make sure you have enough money for the projects, but you're never gonna get it down to zero. That's, either you're overspending or.
No,
you've got money left
and I
over.
think also like Joe, he doesn't want to have to go back to town meeting to ask for more. either.
Exactly.
So it's gonna be, it's gonna be a conservative number, but it'd be nice to know like periodically, what are we gonna have to allocate towards other projects? I don't
Yeah,
disagree with the approach. It's just, it'd be good to have visibility
Yeah,
of
we
what,
can get you.
what are we gonna have?
We had another example was there was money left over from the police station interior renovation and that was applied to something else and I don't remember what it was applied to.
Did
I
we
think it would be
actually
great
apply it
for-
to something? I mean, I do think that we had,
don't know,
select
it was
board meeting
given
when I
back
went
to us.
over them. And then I
What?
think it was discussed, some of the stuff was discussed at town meeting, like funds that were available.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
was a slide of things that were available. And I think now that those projects have passed, it would be a good time, when we have our next FinCom meeting to talk about the funds that are laying around that could be allocated to those projects. Just
Yeah.
because it cleans up these projects that have long since been, like the library's long since been done. It's been 10 years, but I had $90,000 sitting there that was waiting for the next building project. You usually do a building project every 7 to 10 years. So we knew that Killam was on the pipeline, so I didn't concern myself because it wasn't, that we have several. I mean, actually, we don't have a ton laying around, but the library is one of those projects where I couldn't just move it to just anywhere because it has a borrowing term of 30 years. Most of our projects do not have a borrowing term that long. So the rules kind of kept me from being able to take care of it. But now that we have these building projects, they will be, borrowing less, a little bit less because I have this money sitting there. We'll clean them all up.
I just made a note for future agendas there about that. That's, great.
Yeah, and in terms of getting back to your agenda item, so when you're doing this great work for either the select board or the FinCom, finance
We both
people,
want
do
to-
their job of keeping everybody in the loop. How's that?
Yeah, I mean, let's say, like, I know, I mean, there's, I mean, I think I may have said it in the memo, but I'll repeat it publicly that like, there's any talk, I mean, there's, I know that there's talk about money saving ideas or whatever, and like if that kind of discussion, if that's going to be on the agenda for select board, I would love to know about it.
Even at that agenda, I mean, that's a good one.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
it was-
gonna be on every agenda.
That's a hypothetical. I think that was in the packet.
We're gonna have to talk about
Yeah.
the how an override works in Reading, because every community does it differently. Some communities have their taxpayers signing off on annual overrides, and they just gets into the psychological thing that they expect when they're little ones, every year they hit them.
who has an annual override?
I can't give you the
Yeah.
towns. I'm meeting with municipal elected officials and they're telling me, oh, our town has one. It might have been a small town in that case. She's like, we have one every year. I'm like, oh my God.
That's
But for
sounds like a peer
us,
community, but
We
okay.
started
Yeah,
having these
no.
kind of conversations in 2015.
Yeah.
We got one passed in 2018. So I just wanted to make the point too, that it's kind of a long runway. So what the select board talked a lot about last night was, we really got to tighten things up now, because otherwise we're going to be making hard decisions like before we even get to an
I
override
think if we could.
about layoffs, about salary freezes, which are things that we did last
Well, I
time.
think if we can translate like every million in override, how much, I think you had given us a ballpark, right? Like a $5 million override is 500,000. If every million is 100,000 is $100 on a bill, and I'm oversimplifying, but if we have some number, then the public can appreciate, hey, this is why we're trying to not have our budget grow by that extra million, because then that's an extra $100 in property tax for you every year or whatever. Because when I'm looking at what's happening in peer communities, and we should get into that peer community discussion anyway. Who's a peer? Like, I thought somewhere you'd say, oh, Milton is a peer. And Milton just passed, I think it was $9.5 million override. Their population is a little larger than ours. Their budget was about 12 to 13 million smaller than ours, and the override kind of brought it up to what our level of budget was. And then Linfield just passed an override, and their population, their budget, and everything was about half of ours, and their override was like 4.5 million. And I start seeing and saying, okay, I could see what the amount of ours could be. So every million, we cannot have that grow to say, oh, are we gonna face a $10 million override? If we could reduce things and say, no, it's gonna be 7 to 8, which would be low. It's not, I don't think it would ever be 4.5 like we had before, but if we don't have, if we can reduce growth by 1 million or have growth in our tax base from, the Eastern Gateway. Because I recall years ago when we passed the downtown smart zoning, remember Bob LaLesha telling us, we had one year, and I was one of them, we all griped about all the condos and apartments that went downtown, but we got 1 million in new growth.
Yep.
And I don't know if we have the potential with Eastern Gateway or anything to get another 1 million in new
Potential.
growth.
The
We
horizon's
have
pretty
we have
long.
new growth every
Shoot
year,
Street.
but not that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like the
Took
extreme.
off, like
Yeah.
that would
About half of that.
Yep.
Could we get half of that somewhere and then half of that, and then that's okay, that's 1 million less in override we
No, for
need.
sure. That's the goal to.
And I love
Do
this
that
select board
in-
numbers,
in economic
how
development,
about
so.
the CPA as again, how do we talk about that? Is that a way to stave off an override? Because we have at least one select board member that said recently, and it wasn't me, but I want to stave off an override as long as possible. And I'm like, I can get behind.
But CPA is still, will look like an override, it's more tax,
More
will it
tax.
look like, it will look like it's people.
It's gonna be like $50 versus 400, like, and what the numbers that we're getting out of the school and recap.
Yeah, no, I know, but and it's dedicated to projects that they have to say, do we need that? Because I'm just worried about, honestly, the union contracts, and
Yep.
that's why I mentioned the schools.
Yeah.
Because, their contracts are up in 2027. They have to start negotiating in like a year and a half early. What are they gonna ask for and what can they afford? What can we afford to say, yes, you can give them? I mean, that's the bulk of our money is salaries. So we need to keep the schools in the loop so they don't start, like Stoneham gave away they were saying, oh, we're gonna offer our teachers union 15%, even though they hadn't negotiated with them yet, because they were trying to get around the over. That's a lot, but if we have to do the same thing, we have to know what that will cost us.
For sure. And I meet with the superintendent on those issues too and keep each other informed. So
Yeah,
So it's not that they're off on their own doing whatever, you know, we talk quite a bit, so.
I guess we just have,
Yeah,
and it's
and I
the
can
school
share that-
committee, we have to tell, because they're the ones negotiating to say, look,
Yeah.
you can't offer them 15%, or maybe you can.
Maybe you can, with the money you're getting, increase money from the states, but understand like here, like, it's drying up, right?
Yeah.
That's what I think,
No,
and
it
that's
is.
what the
That's
select
the
board
best.
has
Yeah.
started being consistent about that message. The fun, we're turning the funnel off, guys, we have to.
Mhm.
So, and you do it early before you get deep into the budget,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, so.
That peer community thing, though, is it time to talk about that, or you
Yeah,
want to
so
get to?
let's move on to the next
Intriguing.
agenda item. I was a little, I wondered if I was making a mistake by putting open-ended topics on the agenda. It could go for a little while, but I think this is a good discussion. We definitely touched on.
You said reviews of finance committee policies, that's not open.
Oh, we didn't even get to that.
Oh,
so
it's
that's-
Can we talk
not,
about the seminar before you leave here? Can we talk about?
Relax. It's like, we're good.
My printer doesn't work. I couldn't print out a copy. Sorry.
No, okay.
I'm blind here.
So the next topic on the agenda is another one that I tried to give some context in the packet on this. There was a seminar organized by the Mass Municipal Association that I attended. I think Karen, you said you attended it as well. And on developing local financial policy. It's called, I mean, I get, now that I'm the chair, I get all these
You get all the
emails
stuff.
for like on the MMA, like
Any,
once a day.
any FinCom members can participate. Are you the only one getting it? Or is-
Yeah, which is
Gonna ask if-
maybe a thing that we should fix.
Usually,
No, it's not, right,
doesn't go to that finance, it just goes directly to you.
the finance.
I got alerted to it, I just couldn't, I had conflicting work meetings. I didn't do it, but-
Goes to, I thought it went to.
Under the umbrella of communicating with ourselves.
Yeah, I know,
Perhaps we should be
So
better
many
about making
webinars.
sure that
Doesn't work.
those go to the whole committee.
Okay, I assume they did, they come to me too.
No, we don't have, there's no email alias for the committee that goes
Okay.
directly to the committee.
Hmm.
If you email finance at whatever, it goes to, I think it goes to me and it goes to Jackie and
Goes
it
to
goes
me.
to Sharon and it goes to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's it.
Okay.
So like, why does it, should it go to the vice chair as well? Maybe. Should there be a way for one of the, because if it's really meant for the whole committee,
Yeah.
this has happened before. Like we had during town meeting, John Sasso sent an email to finance at the town finance address, and
Mhm.
clearly his intent was to write to the entire committee. So I think I asked Jackie to forward his message. to
Yeah,
the
I mean,
committee.
usually Jackie's pretty good, like,
Yeah.
send something to me as vice chair, but yeah, because we can't start forwarding it and run into open meeting law
Right,
things or
right.
have serial
I mean, if
communication.
there's a, right, I mean, if
Jackie
it's,
can send it
if
though.
it's just us forwarding other people's email, I think we're pretty safe as far as OML is concerned, as long as we don't editorialize on it when we forward it.
What's the quantity of emails you get?
I don't know, probably, I get so much email. I don't know, 1 or 2 a day, maybe on business days kind of a thing. But it's because, I mean, it's almost all from the MMA.
Yeah.
They are a chatty organization.
They do.
They got the number of emails I got about, I spent as much time archiving emails about this web seminar as I spent at the seminar. But it was a good seminar. So getting back on topic. This was Sean Cronin, who's I think spoken at a financial forum before and so forth, and Theo Calvis, both from the Mass Department of Local Services, and it talked about developing local financial policies. And I knew we had a few. I knew we talked about them. Some of them are very important. Our 5% capital policy is very integral to how we do a lot of planning. Our reserve policy is weighing on all of our minds because we know we don't want to run out of money and have to ask for an override. Interestingly, peer communities wasn't on his list of like regular policies, even though that's one that we have used many times in discussions to talk about whether, I mean, we're not an eccentric community. We are, one of our first questions that many people have is, well, what does everybody else do? And that's always a fair question. But who is everybody else? And does Linfield still count even though they have Market Street? That kind of thing.
Let's face it.
Well, yes. So, but anyway, so they, in terms of process, so they outlined a frankly overwhelming set of policies. I think 20 in all, roughly 10 regarding planning and roughly 10 regarding operations. I don't have opinions on policies for operations because that's obviously up to you all.
or maybe up to, the select board supervising you all, but, that's not a concept.
Too, is that, that's another thing that the select board and the finance committee should collaborate on. Because it isn't like the jurisdiction of one board or this committee. So, and that falls under the, how do we communicate better?
Essentially. So let me do a better job of getting to the point. They have, there's at least two ways that we could review our own policies. One is we could make up a process ourselves informally. Another is that it's possible for the town executive, in our case, the select board, to ask the Department of Local Services, Financial Management Resource Bureau, for help with reviewing policies. I don't know if we actually want that help. I figured I would ask this committee first before asking the select board if it was interesting to them. But the
Wait list, it's free. So it's like, we could say, that would be a great idea. So what they do is they come in, Sean comes in, and it's just a time to say what financial policies you have, how long they've been in place, do they still make sense? And they're just bringing in, like, they're doing this with all communities, so they'll come in and do it with us. And it's something we could do as a town, and we've never done it before.
I mean, I have sort of, I'm bringing this up. I will, the first thing I want to say though is like, I don't actually think we need to, I'm not aware of a lot of things that need to change. I think a lot of this is more like capturing things that are working right now so that we can, observe them, frankly. Our budget planning process makes sense to me. Our capital planning process makes sense to me. But on the other hand, they might have some insights too. I mean, everyone in this room has asked, and everyone on the Zoom has asked, why do we have more regeneration and more use of free cash than other communities? Like, what are we doing? Is there something we do differently? And is that something that would be reflected in a policy that we would either intentionally keep or intentionally change?
Well, we don't have that many policies, and the last time we changed or implemented one, probably about the time Sharon started, like around 2012 was when that 5% capital policy was put in place. And when was so even if we just did internally, what are the policies that are in place? And I've had the question in my mind, not having come to this particular meeting, is that $200,000 FinCom reserves still the right number? Because that hasn't changed in over a decade.
That's not true. We upped it during COVID.
150.
We upped it, it was 400.
All right, well, then it gets back to the communication.
Yeah.
So
Well, let me
that's a-
tell you what we do have for policies. I mean, just so we
Well,
know.
you don't have to do it
like,
now,
I think
but
we've
the
updated.
stabilization as well, we've kind of danced around
I
the
want to hear what Sharon was saying. Go ahead, Sharon.
So in the time I've been here, I know that we created an OPEB funding policy. We've done a debt policy, that we've updated a debt policy. We've done the policy for our reserve policy. So I know that there's been at least 3 or 4 that have been updated by FinCom since I've been here. And I think that we didn't even do the OPEB funding policy until the override passed. So it was that recent, because there was some apprehension about committing us to anything when it came to OPEB, how much we would actually commit to OPEB every year until we could start funding it after pension was fully funded. But because we were in a similar situation at the time, we talked about it, we introduced that policy several times, but it didn't actually get, like, I think it just wasn't even voted on until we had the override passed. But so we have updated through FinCom some policies in recent years. But it never hurts to revisit. It never hurts to have a second set of eyes on it. I don't have any objection to, sending them to DOR or DLS and see what they, if they do that for free, to look at your policies and make some recommendations. The other thing that's worth noting is our policies are given to S&P when we do our borrowings. Every time we do a borrowing, they do a new bond rating for us and they ask us about our policies.
Yeah.
The only comment that they've given us that was, and I wouldn't even call it a bad policy, is that our debt policy, they love that we pay our debt off quickly and that we don't carry a lot of debt. But they say our policy isn't isn't such where there's parameters that are so strict that would say that a manager in the future would do it the way we've been doing it all this time. You know, every manager that you change, they might have a different perspective. And the only thing that they said was, we'd love to see that policy say, well, if it's over this much money, we only borrow for this much, you know, like a term of
Well, we
10
have that
years or, you know.
The $4 million inside of the L, is it 5?
I've got them open here.
Yeah, there's the
Um,
policy that says
that
that if it's
raised?
over
That
$4
was raised,
million
right?
dollars.
Maybe it was raised, so yeah, the updates that Sharon's talking about, the debt and capital policy and the OPEB
I think it was
policy
like
were both
2018.
August 2018, exactly, right after the, because the override passed that spring.
So that was 7 years ago. I think they said
Uh,
6 years is a
yes,
good timeline to just kind of revisit them, right?
Don't we revisit all the policies every year?
No,
We have a discussion about them every year, I think.
I put them on the agenda
Yeah.
sometime last fall, but they'd not been discussed
the
before
select
that.
board isn't engaged in this, which is.
Well, I think Andrew's talking about just for the
Just for
FinCom.
the FinCom, yeah.
But yeah, no,
Our
I think we
policies.
hadn't, I mean,
Not the.
No,
Just out.
I stuck my nose into this topic on my own volition last year, you know, partly inspired by comments like the things about, you know, wait, what is the right reserve that lenders want to see,
Right.
or things like that? Or how do we get from 5% to 5.5% back to 5%? Like, what was the history there? Because
That was not every year, no? From FinCom?
In our stabilization fund, I don't think we have a policy around, that is
Should
just,
do that probably every year.
what?
Yeah, there's $2 million in our stabilization fund that went in, not the last override, but the override before
Yeah.
it, and has never been
2000,
touched.
2000
I mean, it
-ish.
just kind of sits there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's.
no, I would,
that's-
we should really
It was-
look at that one and
So
talk about it.
2003, I think in 2003, I think we put
makes
this
sense.
$1.5 million in there, and it's
Yep,
grown to
haven't done
about
anything
$2 million. We've
Yeah.
never touched it, yeah. I mean, but that's the bond rating agencies look at that and they say, great, you've got a little pool of cash here, a little pool of cash here. You know what I mean? Like, we have a fair amount of reserves, but like I said, the recent years have been more challenging. And so we have to have a solution to our issue in terms of how much we're using. But they've always viewed us as strong in that we borrow for a very brief amount of time. Our policy says that we'll borrow for the lowest possible term that we can be afforded. That's the way it's worded, something to that effect. The only thing that would make it stronger is to have specific, I mean, then we're kind of tying our own hands, but you don't have to do that. I feel like the S&P has not had any negative comments about the financial policies that we have in place. But we're always open to any, you know, especially DLS, anything that DLS has to say about our policies would be something we'd want to pay attention to, because that's who we go to. That's who we
Yeah,
go
no,
to for help.
that surprised me too, Karen. So in the webinar, there was one question about, in the Q&A, I think, about, actually, Q&A was anonymous, so for all I know, maybe you put in the question. But, there was a question about like the, you know, distinction between free cash and stabilization fund. And Sean Cronin was surprisingly definite about not caring about the difference between those two. I would have thought that because a stabilization fund requires a 2/3 vote, that it would look good from a, you know, risk perspective to have more money in that and less in free cash, because it's harder to spend that, and therefore it's harder for us to make a mistake that would hurt our ability to pay back later. But no, he was like, nope, nobody cares. I'm like,
Depends if
okay.
you're talking about like the bond rating agencies, like Stoneham is I just looked them up, AA+ Stoneham. I'm like, so you can say like, and you're not wrong, but the bond rating, that's not the end all be all, but we have a psychological barrier that you already referred to tonight. And when town meeting doesn't try to spend our stabilization funds, but I get concerned when the general population says, we have massive amounts of free cash sitting there. And the truth is, Sharon, right? Right now we're like 2 years away from running out of money in our current spend rate. So if we picked a middle ground and we talked about what that middle ground would be, and you just kind of move some more stuff in that stabilization fund, it would give me a greater comfort level and maybe take the pressure off of like, we gotta spend all of that. It's just.
It does, yeah, I mean, I think the discussion has already shifted, but for several years, there's been a lot of talk of like, it's free, you know, we have so much free cash, why don't we spend it?
Yeah.
And
we
it's
spend
like, well, we should definitely spend some of it. But if it's an entire undifferentiated pool, then like, how much is some is entirely in the eye of the beholder.
But we're talking to residents in town meeting and with stabilization, we're like, that is your absolute, like, and maybe that needs to be 1 year of
Isn't
free
it a
cash.
perk of our charter that other communities, what we call free cash, they call stabilization, where we have a separate, we have something we call free cash and we have something we call stabilization. But I think, and I'm looking at Wilmington and like how they funded their senior center and they didn't have to take loans because we had money in our stabilization fund, but that was the same, it's the same word for what we call free cash, they call it stabilization. Is that accurate? That like
I mean,
stable, or
it's
is
possible.
stabilization
Everybody does
defined
it
by
different.
law versus free cash?
I think that they're both considered reserves.
Okay.
One's more restricted than the other, whereas like the stabilization, it requires a 2/3 vote, whereas free cash is a majority vote to get it out. That's the only real difference that I know of regarding it.
Is that our,
That whole word free, it's just like, it's
And
free.
I hate the
it's
word
not
free
free.
cash. People think they think it's like
Say,
available for
everybody on this
whatever,
committee knows
but
nothing's
the
free.
truth of the
Nothing's
matter
free.
is we need to
Nothing
keep
can.
reserves at least a double-digit percentage or we jeopardize our AAA bond rating. You really want to keep it in that 10-15%
Karen,
I don't think
range.
they want that much.
So Karen, are you saying, like, say we have the, right now it's 2 million in reserves and then, you know, it might be 15 million at free cash, but we're blowing it at 7 million. Move something into reserves that we agree we're not gonna touch and that's gonna keep our bond rating. And then now we have the more realistic opinion, hey, we only have 7 million or whatever in free cash and we can only take 1 million a year to help the budget. Like,
That's
is
the
that what you're saying? Is that what,
And
not that
honestly,
that's what it, that
I-
it actually.
Not- I'm getting number one would probably
Rating
be
agencies.
higher
Chelsea has a really
Immediate
good.
override.
Immediate.
Chelsea-
austerity, yeah.
I
but-
mean, they are just, they want to lend money, so I don't really care. And I see Stoneham has a AA+ bond rating. Look how many crappy town.
But what's the difference between double A and triple A?
Not a lot. I don't know. I mean, it's a bit, but not a lot. But
I was just gonna
I
say,
don't know
like.
what the difference would be in a rate, but AAA gets the best. bond.
I just
Gets
hate
the best rate.
I should have gotten the, I was gonna say, gotta go out and borrow it, if they're still using it in conservation.
Your interest will be way
Right.
more
Right.
because of the amount of money borrowed.
But I mean, that putting it into reserves keeps it more untouchable.
find me
than
a town that has
How
a
you
B+ rating. Find me one.
There's probably some.
Stoneham doesn't have one. Stoneham has a AA+ rating.
Well,
No, but I mean,
Probably has-
A
A community of our size,
I bet they, I bet
a
they
community of
are.
our size, having a AAA bond rating is a very good sign for our community.
We've had
and
it
it's
for
something we should
25
try
years
to
since I
maintain.
moved here, more.
No, actually,
and that
it's only
speaks
been a
to-
AAA since, for 13 years, because when I started, we were a AA+, and then
Okay.
we were upgraded,
So
the first
13
bond.
years.
So it's been 13 years. I mean, but for a small community to get to AAA is definitely an accomplishment. It's not easily obtainable because it's hard to build up the reserves that we have. And that's what they really look at is how are you doing things? Do you have good reserves and are you accumulating
Right.
too much debt? And we can
Do
keep
we
that
want to
all
ask the
under
select
control.
board to?
That's where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
It sounds like the next,
Like, what, to bring these people in, you mean?
Yes.
exactly. So I think the next order of business, I don't know if the select board wants, me or somebody else to come talk about it, or
Mhm.
you just want to present the idea to them, or, I mean, obviously you have the same resources in terms of the article and webinar and so forth, but
Yep.
yeah, I think if it sounds like there's enough interest in this committee that it's worth taking the select board's time to ask them if they would be supportive of doing this.
Okay.
Because there are a variety of, there's enough questions about enough policies that this starts to sound like a good idea.
We have a lot of new people on the select board too. So
Also, true, I mean, we're not, right,
I've never served on the finance committee, so it would really be a great
It's true, but-
exercise.
true, the select board used to be the Finance Committee Alumni Association, and now it's.
So,
So
it's a variety of
But yeah, yeah.
perspectives, so.
Comment, please.
And-
I've sat on those S&P rating calls. And I must say that they go through fine loop and they look at all of these things. They look at your policies, they look at your cash reserves, they look at how your regeneration is, they look at your financial statement, they look at your management. And when I said they look at all these things, but I would say that in this time that we are right now, especially with the upcoming borrowing, we need to make sure that we're not doing anything that's jeopardizing the triple A
Sure.
bond rating.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Oh, yeah,
all I'm
not-
saying.
not right now,
And
yeah.
I'm all about looking at the policies that we have, but I have to say, those policies, the way that they're written, that's one of the reasons that we have the triple A.
Your point is that-
If it's working, basically, don't touch it.
I hear,
That's all.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, I'm
Yes.
less,
To save every dollar.
I'm less concerned because I think every sentiment I've heard here is only interested in making, policies that are more solid, certainly in spirit. And then we'd have to, of course, need maybe some professional help in understanding what that means in
Yeah.
practice. So I'm not too worried about jeopardizing that, but point well taken. It's not, the reason to revisit these policies is not because S&P doesn't like them. S&P likes them just fine, thank you.
We probably won't change them before she goes out to borrow in January or.
There's that too, yeah.
Yeah, there's a waiting list for this process anyway,
Yeah,
so I don't even know how long it is.
See.
Yeah.
where we end up. Yep, okay.
So, awesome.
No, because they'll love it. Like, what if we come up with a couple more awesome policies? They'll be like, this is great. You can keep your AAA.
All right, awesome, thank you. Then let's get back to the agenda. If I can find which tab has
Future
the,
agenda.
there we go.
Yeah.
All right, so future agendas, oh gosh, this is the time of year when we, this is our last scheduled meeting this fiscal year. Well, I forgot during liaison reports, it's not a liaison assignment, but I am on the Finance Committee Appointment Committee, which did reappoint Ed, Emily, and Joe. So glad to have all three of you with us for another 3 years.
3 years, woo! So future agendas, when is our next meeting?
That's exactly the question I wanted to ask. That is, often we'll meet in,
Well, usually we have some sort of financial forums coming up in the fall, but.
yeah, we
Before
usually
then?
meet before that. I mean,
Yeah.
I want to say, did we meet in July last year? Did we meet in?
There was something we met to reorg, but.
Yeah, we meet, whatever the first meeting is in the new
July,
fiscal
August,
year.
And sometimes we skip one
Reorg.
meeting and I don't know what everyone's vacation schedules are too.
Gonna be away for some.
Sharon's on vacation right now.
You are?
Yep.
Oh, no.
Serious?
I'm in
Oh, gosh.
Virginia. Okay,
Oh,
nice,
nice.
thank you.
Ask you about that connection outside of the meeting.
Mhm.
All right, so let's see, I guess, in terms of what else, presumably we will have a future agenda item to follow up on whatever the select board says in response to our outreach to them. So let me make something here about discussion of policy review with S4. All right. And I don't know how soon we would get on the select board agenda, but
Yeah, they have one meeting in July, which is the 15th, and then 2 meetings in August scheduled, so
all right.
we'll see.
Well, I guess, I think the 15th is pretty full, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we did have a meeting in July last year, and then we had a meeting on the 20-something of August, I want to say.
I think we probably have to have an August.
On the 23rd last
meeting For the September.
Yeah, I would say that we meet in August at some point.
Yeah, no, by August, we'll actually be starting to like pick our topics for financial forums and stuff.
Right.
So, shall I reorganize? If we literally have nothing to discuss except reorganizing, I assume we can just reorganize in August, but if we have anything else to discuss, then the question is, do we?
August, that's fine.
That,
We can meet in August. I don't see.
Yeah, we
a
can
meeting
schedule
before.
Mhm.
all right.
Usually meet on Wednesdays, right?
Typically, yes. It's been our custom.
So the 6th, the 13th, the 20th, the 26th.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm trying to find my.
I don't know when school starts, like, because I don't have, this is my first year, it says 2010 without a kid in the school. So I don't even know when the first day of school.
Wow.
Here.
A lot of times we're around that time. but
Yeah.
Yeah, all right,
Probably the
so,
27th, but.
yeah, so, I mean, I don't think I have any significant, I'm looking, just checking, I don't think I have any, yeah, no constraints on Wednesdays for me in August.
Does anyone have any constraints on Wednesdays in August?
I would prefer not the 27th, only because I know the 28th, I'm moving my daughter into college, so I'll probably.
Oh, okay,
be
yeah.
Busy, but that's like, that's also the first day of school, which may be busy for people on the committee like you and Emily,
Yeah.
with kids, so.
Yeah, and if we don't,
Say August 20th, maybe.
This is what I mean.
uh,
Granted, this is AI, it's probably wrong, but it says there are no towns in Massachusetts with a BB rate. That's right.
Well, that's-
Great inflation.
All the taxes.
but let's
moved on.
Yes, right. The two of you could have a chit chat about bond ratings after we adjourn.
Yeah.
You wanna pick August 13th or the 20th or something?
Yeah, I mean, is the,
Whatever.
yeah, I mean,
Either one of those is fine with me.
Do we need
I'm
to
okay
meet
with
in
you.
August or late? Like
Does
the
it
14th?
depend on the availability?
I mean, I think we're not meeting in July.
Usually always
Everyone
find a
meet-
room, like, Jackie
Yeah.
can check the.
But you also need to set dates for the financial.
So like, I don't know when.
Exactly. I want to meet, I want to meet earlier in August.
Who else has
So
their
maybe
Wednesday
meet
night
August the
meeting?
13th?
Yeah.
All right, let's pencil in the 13th.
August
Okay.
13th, yeah.
Yeah,
7 o'clock.
that's very neat.
We need to pick the financial forum ahead of time just to get the library or whatever, because that gets.
Is that the reason to meet in July, is so we can get a room for a financial forum? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm actually serious.
I mean, we could start looking, I can look at the library rooms if you just give me a sense.
Yeah, I mean, we have had,
A meeting just.
Like, we've had them around September 19th, you know.
yeah, we've had them generally, it's been late September and late October.
I guess we have
Well,
to
this
check,
time,
we have to check the Jewish holiday schedule for that too, so we don't conflict, and I do not know those.
you also have to back up from when the town meeting is in the. fall.
Yeah,
This is
right.
Like
Yeah,
Yeah,
2 weeks to post and all that stuff.
yeah. Mhm.
right. So, yeah, I mean, in the past, we've done,
All right, Rosh Hashanah says September 22nd to 24th, Yom Kippur, October 1st to 2nd, so just looking to try to avoid those holidays.
what was the first one, September?
It said, Google says it's September 22nd to 24th with Rosh Hashanah.
Okay, so not Wednesday, the 24th,
Mhm.
but, potentially Wednesday, the 17th, for instance, for
Yeah.
the first financial forum. All right, yeah, actually, Matt, if you don't mind seeing what the, a room availability is on the 17th, and then, sometime.
Yeah, because then the following week is Yom Kippur, October 1st to 2nd, so you wouldn't want to go out to
Yeah.
October anyway.
No.
17th.
We've had two financial forums for the last couple of years. I suspect maybe we won't have as much, because we did have, Killam and Recal were, of course, topics.
Yeah, we had a whole forum just on that, so.
Yeah, so maybe we don't need too many, but I don't know. It is, at the same time, just the free cash usage discussion is
Yeah,
really
that's gonna be
the most interesting one so far in my tenure.
Yes, I think so.
So definitely want to have a financial forum.
All right, so I'll check on the 17th. of
Okay,
November.
yeah, that'd be good, because then that gives us, then we could meet on the, 2 weeks after that or something. To discuss, to actually vote on free cash usage.
Yep. Okay.
Cool. All right, so we actually penciled in a bunch of meetings here.
Yep, couple meetings.
All right. All right, then we have, if there's nothing else to discuss about
It was just a minute.
then it's minutes. We have, I think, 2 different minutes to approve. Yes, we have minutes from, good, Jackie's still there, awesome.
Yep.
We have minutes from the 19th.
Thanks, Karen. We'll see
Thanks,
you.
Karen, see you later.
Here.
Which was the,
That was the big night of approving all the articles.
that was the big budget night. That was the warrant and the budget.
Mhm.
And
And then there was the
So-
one for the first night of town meeting, we had the school. Some of
yes,
these.
and the other one was that goofy and the meetings do not record the part where we failed to vote to adjourn because I screwed up the.
Oh, yeah, they did,
Thank
yeah.
you all for bailing me out there.
Mhm.
I don't think the agenda the minutes need to reflect that. That's weird. Is it required for all motions, including the failed ones, to be in the minutes?
No.
So.
I don't.
Was I not there for the votes though?
Walked in late. I thought it was Joe McDonough was in for one
You-
vote.
You were
Yeah,
remote
right.
and you bailed.
Yeah, so you stayed for, right, sorry, what happened is you stayed on Zoom for the warrant articles because you wanted to be sure to vote on those, especially Article 15.
Yeah.
Oh,
And then, so we did roll call votes for the warrant articles, then
I was off.
then you on off, and then we were able to do show of hands for the umpteen budget lines. So,
So Article 11, did that have me off?
you left me in there, and then it was, then we moved on to the budget lines. So, yeah, that matches my recollection of how we did things. So, I've got an interesting, yes. I don't know if I'm about to say fits into agenda or not. The fact that the votes are okay, I will share this with the office reporting from the appointment committee. One of the interesting things, because I asked people, candidates and reapplying people, what they, liked or disliked about committee, and there was both positive and negative feedback about the fact that we tend to vote unanimously. There was the sort of you all are not actually, you should challenge things more. And the thing is that we do have, the positive take, which I think,
I know you know what votes on record.
you do.
You had one, didn't you?
Yes, I might,
Yeah, but I mean, the point well taken, like this was not an uncontroversial set of discussions. So what ended up happening, what someone else observed, I think correctly, is that we have sometimes very contentious discussions and then we come to a consensus.
Yeah.
Which is not the same thing as everybody thinking the same way out of the gate.
Or sometimes it's like I didn't agree with things, but I agreed, well, let town meeting decide, because we're not the ultimate decider, even if I might have said, well, I'm not. Like I wasn't fully on board until even after we voted, like pickleball amount came down. I think a couple of us weren't comfortable with some of those amounts, and then it got refined by town meeting anyway.
Yeah. So
Things
anyway,
like that.
so that's just reminded of that because of these minutes that are just chock full of 900s and 800s.
How many people were there that you talked to? Because the 3 got back on with him.
Yes, and there were 3 applicants.
3 applicants.
So there was a David Videra who applied last year as well. There was
Chris Cook applied, because
yeah, and Chris Cook,
I
yes,
suggested that
yes,
he,
Chris Cook.
I didn't know if
applied.
everyone was re-upping, because he's got
Yes,
new
I think he was-
qualifications, so
yeah.
keep him in mind.
Yeah, no, he and it was, I mean, that was the, all the consensus, Alan and Chris Haley and I, we all thought that these were good candidates. We just don't have any vacancies because we also think we have good people on the committee now. So,
Great.
there's some other positions on it, like the trust fund commission is looking for one.
Right, no, because he has
There's
a
a
good
lot of
finance
open,
background.
yeah, no, I think that's
Definitely.
hopefully find some folks, some of those. Yeah, I believe, one of them, I think, may have also applied for Board of Health and works in pharmaceuticals, so he might be,
Yeah.
he might end up there. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I suppose the select board probably voted on that last
They
night.
did.
I don't know how many they appointed last night, I saw things in the packet, but.
Yeah, they appointed everybody last night.
Oh, okay, all right, cool.
Under their authority.
All right,
yeah.
cool.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I did tell people I didn't get on the finance committee the first time I applied either, so.
Yeah.
Exactly. You're, all right, excellent. So I'm not hearing any comments on the minutes, so,
Make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
we probably need to vote separately on the 2 different minutes, I'm guessing.
So the minutes of which date?
March.
29.
Yeah, March 9th.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Marianne. I think I got the first.
We'll let Emily
It's the
unmute.
hardest part of the, we will let Emily make the move to approve the next set.
Yeah,
of
it's
minutes.
just unmute
But all right, okay, so roll call vote on the approving the minutes from March 19th. Emily,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
Yep. Henry,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Marianne,
Yes.
and Joe Carnahan, yes. Right.
Unanimous.
Rare. When has any board ever not
All right.
approved their own
Okay,
minutes? So-
all right, okay. Are there any comments before Emily gets to move to approve the minutes from
hold on, let me get the date right. The,
April 2nd, and well, you got people here who have to abstain too, anyway.
oh, okay.
So it won't be unanimous.
See, you don't have to abstain, I think.
Don't have to
That's a-
abstain.
I mean,
Yeah, you could approve them.
you're allowed to. That was one fun thing of the appointment committee, because the appointment committee routinely has only one member carry over year to year.
Yeah.
And it's entirely, you know, someday, decades from now, when we ever have another moderator, it will be possible to have a complete turnover of 100% of committee,
Wow.
so that none of the people on the committee will have been there the previous year.
Hmm.
Because all you need is for the select board, the finance committee, and to each pick new chairs, and we do pick new chairs.
Yeah.
Anything on this?
Is there any way for the record to show that Ed and I were just missed it by a minute?
So 5 minutes.
They did indicate when Joe came in, and then you could say,
Yeah, I get-
did you come in
I
before
got
we
mentioned,
adjourned? Were you
so-
part of the
Yeah,
adjournment? All
I think
right.
you were.
yeah, exactly. If you came in after we adjourned, you are out of luck, man. That is not part of the, that is not part of the meeting.
But then, yeah, even the second adjournment.
I mean, we didn't, yes, even the second, yes. Oh, there we go. It is in there. Yes, yes, Joe. Yep, that was still, sorry, gonna laugh at that. I'm either gonna laugh and be embarrassed, so I will laugh.
Nothing happens after adjournment, that's all.
Right, okay. All right, Emily, do you want to make a motion? We haven't given.
Are you,
a chance
are
yet.
you ready for me?
We are ready.
Motion to approve the minutes from the 4-2 Finance Committee meeting as presented.
Second,
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Mark. Roll call vote. Ed,
yes.
John.
Abstain.
Okay, all right, I gotta actually write this down.
If it's a.
No, we're good. Yeah, make me honest here. All right. Ed, yes. John abstained. Joe McDonough,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Henry,
I will abstain.
keeping this interesting. All right, I like it. Mark,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes?
and Joe Carnahan, yes.
Was that 5 total yeses?
That was.
But the good thing about a place like this, is I feel like you could still be hungry, you order.
6.
Something happened there, yeah.
Okay, cool. We just need to have 5. We ran into trouble in rec years ago, so I just wanted to make sure we had at least 5.
Oh, yeah, no, we had 6.
Good check.
Yeah, no, we're good.
Yep.
So, all right, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Emily. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mark. Ed, for voting.
Sure, yes.
John,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Emily,
Yep.
Henry,
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Mary Ann.
Yes.
And Joe Carnahan, yes. Thank you all for a great meeting.
Okay.
Later.
Fast.
Thank you.